Similarly speaking, an asset that was disposed of involuntarily would be any asset that was destroyed accidentally. For example, testator dies in a car accident in his very expensive sports car, and he has specifically gifted that sports car through his estate plan. In that circumstance, when the crash and the destruction of the vehicle is also what killed the testator, clearly testator did not intend to voluntarily dispose of the assets. The beneficiary would be entitled to the insurance proceeds that would be payable because of the destruction of the vehicle. And that is Ademption. I can tell you, if on an exam you see a testator die in a car accident and the car is a specific gift of property through the estate plan, it is worth discussing the insurance proceeds and the fact that they are not deemed. Similarly, if testator dies in a house fire, we know the house is insured. Who is entitled to the insurance proceeds from the destruction of the house? That would be covered by Ademption. Let's talk now about abatement. Abatement is covered in the second PowerPoint. Abatement is the process of reducing gifts to the beneficiaries under the will. When is abatement relevant? It is relevant when the estate is not big enough to pay all of the debts of the estate as well as all of the gifts. We know that someone's interest under the estate plan has to be abated or reduced. Every state has an order by which gifts are reduced when when there's insufficient assets in the estate. This is particularly relevant in practice when we go through a recession. We go through a recession and the value of decedent's estate has substantially reduced. The decedent may or may not have revised his or her estate plan to accommodate the substantial reduction in assets. And so we look to abatement into the state statute to reduce someone. So how do we go about doing this? The statute in Nebraska is 30-24,100, and it is in your supplement. Our first step with abatement is classifying gifts. Well, actually, that's not true. Our first step with abatement is looking to the language of the will. Sometimes estate planners explicitly include abatement language or an order of abatement in the terms of the will. And if it is specified, then the provision of the will govern. That is sort of our first step in this process. If there is no provision in the will, that is when we look to the statute, which in Nebraska, as I said, is 30-24,100. Now, the abatement statute is different in every state. The provisions of the abatement statute, as a general rule of thumb, like intestacy, are intended to reflect or carry out the intention of the average testator. The question is really, what gifts would the testator want to be axed out first? And so we will go through as a first step and classify all of the gifts. The abatement statute runs class by class through the gifts. First, we use any intestate property. That is what we get rid of first. So we have the first class, which is intestacy. We go through and we reduce all of the gifts in that class. So we go through and we reduce all of the intestate property on a pro rata basis. And so if there is $1 million in intestate property and we only need to come up with $500,000 to cover the deficiency, we would reduce any beneficiaries taking intestate property by 50%. We cover the deficiency. We do not need to proceed any further. I can tell you that most, if not all, professionally drafted estate plans contain residuary clauses, and so there will be no intestate property. The next class that we reduce or wipe out is residuary gifts. We go first through intestate property, then residuary gifts, and if our deficiency is covered, we do not proceed any further. If our deficiency is not covered, we then move to the next classification, which is general gifts. We would do a pro rata reduction on general gifts. If we do not have enough money to cover the deficiency in the category of general gifts, we then move up to reduce specific gifts. When we cover our deficiency, we stop. So if we cover our deficiency with residuary gifts, we do not proceed up to general gifts. And if we cover our deficiency with general gifts, there is no need to move up and wipe out any specific gifts. There is within each category a pro rata reduction. And so if we need 75% of the value of the general gift category, then each beneficiary on that category would be reduced by 75% of what they were supposed to receive. To give you an example, if A and B are each supposed to receive $100 apiece, and we need $150 of the general gift category to cover our deficiency, then A and B will each be left with only taking $25 apiece of what they were originally supposed to receive, and there is no need to wipe out or reduce specific gifts in that circumstance because we've covered our deficiency with $150 of the $200 general gift category. Now, one little nuance that is relevant here, there are some states that add an extra layer to the statute. So your statute in Nebraska is intestacy, residuary gift, general gift, specific gift. In some states, the general rule of order is intestacy, residuary gifts, general gifts to non-relatives, then general gifts to relatives, then specific gifts to non-relatives, and specific gifts to relatives. So in some states, the categories are broken down into two more categories, and the general gifts to non-relatives will be wiped out before general gifts to relatives, and the specific gifts to non-relatives will be wiped out before specific gifts to relatives. And that concludes our coverage of abatement and ademption.